Welcome to Vida Tennis, the podcast for those of us who eat, sleep, breathe tennis. Today, I'm excited to welcome Margie Zesinger to the podcast. She is the head of female tennis at IMG Academy in Bradenton. She has been with IMG since 2000, when he was known to all of us in the tennis world as Bollettieri. She has coached top 10 junior ranked players, winners of Eddie Herr, Orange Bowl, and junior Grand Slam titles. She has also coached junior females through their pro careers and collegiate careers, helping them win their first professional titles and NCAA Division I singles titles. Margie is in the McDowell Sports Hall of Fame, which is in Mill Creek, her hometown. She was the 2020 PTR Florida Member of the Year and the 2021 PTR Member of the Year. She went to James Madison University and played #1 singles. Welcome, Margie, to Vida Tennis. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on this, Jennifer. Thank you for reaching out for me.
Of course. I actually already kind of talked to you in one of my episodes, just kind of, I did a little walk through the PTR, how I liked the conference, and I did mention your name and how much I enjoyed your presentation. And we'll get into your presentation and what you talked about there. But let's start with the beginning. How did you get into coaching tennis? Was this something that you saw yourself doing as a career when you were in college or even growing up?
I honestly always saw myself doing it. So, which is really interesting because I think sometimes a lot of women get to a point where they get into coaching and not sure if they wanted to coach and they try coaching. But for me, it was a little bit different. I was super passionate as a player and very self-driven, but I couldn't see my tennis career just ending after I competed. So in my mind, I wanted to be one of the best female tennis coaches in the industry. And that was always my vision from an early age after I would stop competing.
Awesome. Did you have any female coaches growing up?
I did. I originally, when I was in junior tennis, I had a female coach back in Erie, Pennsylvania named Kelly Irvin, and she was a huge impact on my life as a young girl and a young lady and a mentor. And then in college, I had a female coach as well, Maria Malerba, who was a very motherly figure in the college world. So I did have female coaches and I had incredible male coaches growing up. So both on both standards, but the biggest impact in my vision was when I came to Bollettieri Tennis Academy as a young girl. There was something so special about this academy and Nick and the magic that it felt there. Just there was a certain energy that was just so inspiring. And that got me even more excited for coaching. And coaching at the biggest stage was always my original goal. So
Yeah. So once you graduated from college, you went straight into coaching?
I went straight into coaching day one, 5:30 a.m. with Nick Bollettieri on my very first day on the job. So I was so lucky and so fortunate to be able to cross journeys in my life, in my career with one of the greatest in the games. And I think I would say hands down one of the greatest motivator coaches in any sport.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've been there for a while now. Did you always focus mostly on working with female players? Is that your passion in particular, or was that just kind of like what you fell into as a coach?
So once I became coaching tennis, I always, again, I had one of those moments where I had a vision of always leading a female program. I didn't know when I would do it or how many years it would take to get to that point. But along the way, I was open to doing anything and everything as far as coaching females or males or adults or any kind of coaching skill that would enable me to become a leader one day. And I think that's one thing that I was very open to taking on roles and responsibilities that maybe didn't match up with my exact vision, but they came into my life for a reason because they were teaching me different skills along the way. So I've coached both males and females, but primarily then it eventually just in the female industry.
Yeah, I think it's very natural that as a coach, as a female coach, female players just naturally gravitate towards you. I see it every day. It doesn't matter what level I'm teaching, but especially little girls. I think that they just naturally gravitate towards me no matter what. So I'm sure you experience that a little bit, even though you're in a highly competitive environment. I'm sure they kind of seek you out and just have that kind of bond with you and look up to you.
Yeah, and I take on that responsibility, being women as a sports leader for them or a sports mentor. It's our responsibility to take on that role and to inspire them and be there for them along their journey. So I think it's an honor to be able to influence so many young girls' lives during our career.
Yeah. And what would you say has been one of the main lessons you have learned with working with competitive female players throughout all the years?
Listening and observing first before speaking and getting to understand the person and the individual and what makes them really click versus what you think makes them click. So it's about really connecting in. High level females can be very difficult. They have some qualities that make them high level. Their stubbornness, they're very self-centered, self-driven. Some of those qualities that we see as challenges is actually what makes them unique and actually gets them to excel into that elite space in female tennis. But working within those skills and figuring out how to really connect and get in on each female, there's not one player that's the same. So from a standpoint of coaching, I try and observe what works for them. And yeah, it's just really that individual connection and treating them as an individual.
Yeah. And I think that that goes across all coaching, not just coaching female players, right?
Yeah.
Is the focus on the individual and understanding people's goals. Everyone's going to have a different goal and their different personalities, right? Because you are supposed to, I guess, at times kind of treat everyone the same. And that can be a challenge as a coach because you can't treat everyone the same. Some people can handle certain things that others can. Some people get pushed and motivated by different things, right? So I find that challenging as a coach. Well, at times I have found it a challenge, especially I used to coach college tennis. And yeah, I think it was a challenge there because players kind of wanted to see everyone kind of being treated the same. But as a coach, just like you said, that's not necessarily the approach, right?
Exactly. And I also I believe as coaches, coaching high level females, a lot of times as coaches, we're always looking to see what a female is missing or what they need in their tennis game. But what I have learned over the years is seeing what they have and making them believe in what they have, and also getting females not afraid to compete and practice has been one of the biggest things in my journey here. Is a lot of girls want to just practice and practice baskets of forehands and practice serves, but just the importance of competing in practice is really important for high level females as well. Actually, all at all stages, if you have the resources to.
Oh my gosh, I can so relate to that. I remember when I was a junior player, I was exactly that player. I loved practice.
Mhm.
I loved doing drills and even like hitting drills. And then when it was like, okay, go play a set, it was like it was always very nerve-wracking, but just like you said, you have to just do it, go through that process, play a lot of matches, get tough because that's the real tennis. So
Yeah, you have to play enough matches where you don't think about it, where you just,
yeah,
okay, if you lose, you fail, you learn from it, you do a match debriefing, you figure out what you could have done better to break down your opponent's weaknesses, what were your opponent's weaknesses, and then you move on to the next one and you get ready to compete, and just creating that energy and that habit and that losing that fear of losing and fear of competing. And that's been really my mission over the years here with the hundreds or thousands of girls that I come across on a daily basis.
yeah, now that's a great message for every player out there is don't just practice, go play a lot. If you want to play in tournaments, you should be playing a lot of matches. Now, I love your presentation at PTR. I already told you that. I was raving to everyone about you and just really looked up to you. I think I even told you afterwards that I thought you were an inspiration. I liked how you presented. I like that you brought female coaches and female players to your presentation. I thought that was just such a great idea. Now, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about your presentation. Obviously, you shared some great drills that we can really get into in this type of setting, but you talked a lot about those commonalities and intangibles amongst the top female players that you have worked with. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about those commonalities?
Yeah, so at a young age, you can kind of sense you can't always predict who's going to be on, making it on television in the tennis industry, but there are some definite commonalities that I have seen over the years that I spoke with at the presentation that are really just firsthand experience. And starting with even at age 10 or at a young age, when you're talking with a girl that will succeed, usually on the pro level, when you're talking to them at 9 or 10 or 11 years old, you don't feel like you're talking to a 9 or 10 or 11 years old. You feel like you're talking to somebody who's 30 years old. The level of maturity and clarity on their vision is really sports driven at a young age. They're not thinking about playing toys and whatever an average child would think of at that age. And so they're definitely advanced in that aspect. So that's definitely a sign of a little bit of an it factor when discovering talent at a young age. And they know what it takes to get to the top of each stage. So whether they start out in their age division in junior tennis or they start out at the pro level, challenger level, they know how to rise to the top. They start at the bottom and they know what it takes to just compete and find their way to being one. That's a very common trait that I would see over the past 20 years. A work ethic, a self drive. There's a lot of commonalities that stand out. But again, it's not predictable because if you watch women's tennis now, there's some incredible women at the top of the game that you look at players like Jessica Pegula or Danielle Collins that had different routes that took a little bit longer. It's not how fast you get to the top when you talk about female talent. I think it's really it's not a matter of when you get there, it's just a matter of if you get there and on your own timeline. And yeah, and a lot of it is sustaining a lifestyle that you're personally happy with long enough to really actually reach your goals, whether it's college tennis or if it's a professional level. So as a coaches watching this podcast it really is about creating an environment that's sustainable for young athletes to be happy and do this as a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's an incredible sense of ownership, what you're talking about. At such a young age, I gotta say, I haven't really seen that, but I haven't worked in a high performance environment. So I haven't really seen like a 9 or 11-year-old girl with that kind of sense of ownership on their own game. So that's incredible. But I'm on the other end of the spectrum where I work with a lot of kids that a lot of times they do enjoy the game and they want to compete, maybe in high school, college. And then some that are kind of like you can get the sense that maybe they're being forced to be there. Do you get to see that at all, like in an academy setting where you can kind of feel that, okay, this player is not in here on their own terms. It's more like their parents want them in this type of environment. Do you get that at all?
Yeah, so I would say when over the years, when filtering out our environment here, we try and do our absolute best in the early process of onboarding a player here to really get that feel of are they here for it or is it their parents? Because in the long run, it's not a successful journey if it is just parent driven. But I would say this at every level that I see within our academy, every group, or anywhere that you find girls practicing or boys practicing, there's always a variation of work ethic and self drive. And that's what makes the ones that rise to the top so unique. And I feel even myself, my journey has been so self driven as a player first, but then as a coach, I have been self driven and to want to be a leader. And I think there's a variation in even working in as with coaches, there's different variation of work ethics within an environment that you work with when you have coaches that some work harder than others and some are self-driven more. And you see this across not just in a tennis academy or a tennis setting, but you see it in the everyday work life. And I think tennis is a really great platform for those kids, even if it is a little parent driven, to learn some incredible life skills that they will use in their future. So these young girls, even if tennis is not their main priority, they are still learning so many life skills that will make them better on when they become adults and pursuing their career. How they deal with failure, how they deal with loss, how they deal with a bad day, and just so many different life skills that I think are just great beyond the actual tennis part. So for parents to put their kids in a sport and push them towards a sport, I do like that in the sense that it is teaching them so many life skills. So
Yeah. I would say I've always been pretty self-driven myself as a player and as a coach also. And I think that being in an environment like IMG or, an academy that has a lot of really good players, kind of, I would think it kind of pushes you, even if it doesn't start out that way. Once you're in that type of environment where everyone's so motivated and working so
Mhm.
hard, it kind of infiltrates. It kind of changes you and in a positive way, right? So even if it doesn't start out that way, I think there is hope that once they're in that environment, it's going to naturally happen. Do you see?
Yeah, I totally agree on that. I think the environment has a lot to do with shaping someone and inspiring someone. I step back a lot of times and think, wow, these young women they're dealing with school, they're managing school, they're coming to practice every day, they're managing themselves. A lot of these kids that are here are girls that are living on their own. So they're making sure that they're taking care of themselves, waking up, getting their clothes ready, getting their equipment ready, their tennis bag, getting their books ready for school, and managing the balance between homework and training and traveling to tournaments. So there's just so much respect that I have for all of the young women that are here and how well they manage themselves.
Yeah. And what does a day in your life look like at the academy? Are you on court? Are you still on court? Are you doing admin stuff? What does a normal day look like for you?
So the reason I always wanted to coach and I never got into college coaching, the reason I came here was because Nick created an environment that was so, I don't want to say the word chaotic, but unpredictable. And there's something about this academy that I can show up and on any given day, I can have players that come in that are one in the world and players that are coming from all around the world, famous athletes that come in. It's just an unpredictable environment every single day. And that is what I absolutely love about working here, is that not one day is the same for me. But I would say in general, I'm in a leadership role over the past 5 years here. And so I do oversee, I have a lot of meetings, but the most important thing for me, my heart and my soul is on the court and going around every single day. We have over 115 full-time girls in the tennis program. And so I can honestly say that I know almost everything that is going on in each one of those girls' lives, whatever they're working on their forehand, however they're doing in school, what they did in their tournament, how they're competing. I fully am invested in being that leader for them and seeing that big picture. So when I walk around, my typical day is I spend a lot of it just going from court to court where the girls are at and just checking in, watching them, giving them tips, working with their head coaches or working with their coaches, and building a community, a team around each girl so that they feel like it's not just one person behind them, but it's a village behind them. So yeah, every day is different. Some days I'm dealing with recruiting talent. Some days I'm dealing with fixing a girl's serve or meeting with parents and educating parents. This is their first time that they're ever doing this, and it's their only time. And so it's so important to communicate and bring the parents on board. So I almost say that I feel like I have friendships with a lot of the parents because I want them to feel comfortable that they can come to me as a person and as someone that's in charge of their daughter's tennis development. So I welcome parents and embracing all of the different kids from all around the world, understanding their cultures and meeting with ambassadors from their countries or meeting with coaches. We have a lot of coach meetings here where we get together and we talk about the kids. We call them pod meetings, where we put together our sports psychologists and our fitness coaches and our nutritionists, and everybody goes in one room and we talk about the girls. And I think we do that every week. And then actually before this podcast, I was in a pod meeting with the academic side of this academy, which is extremely important for these girls to be balanced individuals. Even if they want to be top in the world, it's not just about playing tennis. It's about making them well-rounded. Sometimes when you put everything into one area in your life, the opposite of what you want happens. So spreading out their energies and making sure that they're doing well in school, they're happy socially, making good decisions there, and also keeping their tennis journey on track and reassuring them, because this is a very up and down sport, very slow moving sport as far as improvement. And sometimes you can't see the improvements on paper and you can just see it to the human eye, and just reassuring them that their daughters are getting better, or also being honest and truthful and saying, we need more out of your daughter in this area. So
Yeah.
not one day is the same. And I would love for you to come down and shadow me for a day. That would be awesome. Because you're
Yeah,
only in
that's cool.
Tampa. So you could get a day in the life of head of female tennis at IMG Academy. So
Yeah, that would be very cool. That's such a different environment than anything I've done in my career. So that would be really cool. I might have to take you up on that. But I'm glad that you brought up the parents. That's obviously such a huge thing, especially when you're working with kids, right? As a college coach, it's a little bit different. You can kind of treat them more as adults and not have to answer to the parents. It's more your choice as a coach, really, if you want to. And I think most college coaches prefer to not deal with the parents because their kids are officially adults. But in your case, that's not the case, right? These are kids. The parents are heavily involved. They're spending a lot of money. Expectations are high. What are some things that you've implemented, or what are some things that are important to you in how you communicate with parents? You said you work on educating the parents. Do you have like parent meetings and things like that? How does that work for you?
combination, I mean, being accessible as a leader, I think it's one thing that I loved, and I will talk about Nick Bollettieri a lot in this podcast, but he was super accessible. I mean, if you called him on the cell phone, he would pick up instantly. And I think some of the greatest leaders are the ones that are the most accessible. And I think I try and create that for the parents, that they are able to call me at any time, and meetings, being proactive, foreseeing things before reacting, and in communicating with parents. A level of calmness. There's for sure times where parents get emotional about results or emotional about progress. And I think as a young coach in the first part of my career, you internalize because you want to do really well as a young coach. And so a lot of the difficult moments with players or parents, they get under your skin a little bit. You can feel internally that, maybe I didn't do something right. And for me, I don't think there's a parent meeting that would genuinely stress me out, in the sense that there's nothing that I haven't seen over the past 21 years here. So just a calmness and a reassurance and a confidence for them, and understanding where they're coming from, trying to put my perspective on how they view things, and being open-minded and taking some of their feedback and not being defensive about it and listening to it. And maybe there is some feedback from the parents that could really help shape our program or shape their daughter's pathway. So being open-minded when you communicate with parents, even when they don't have a tennis background, parents know their daughters better than we do. So there's a great insight to understanding how the parents view their child and what they think. So yeah, I welcome that communication line.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain level of maturity as a coach to kind of take criticisms, take the emotion of the parents, right? Not get defensive. And
Mhm.
I've had to go through that as a coach. I think everybody has had to go through that as a coach, not getting defensive when the parents come to you with a question because they don't have your set of eyes. They don't see the things that you see as a coach. So that can definitely be a challenge. How long do you think it took you to kind of feel more comfortable as a coach dealing with parents and who did you look up to? I'm guessing Nick, but was there anyone else that maybe you looked up to in how they handled those difficult situations with parents?
Couple pieces of advice. Number one, when my mindset in my career shifted from less being about me and what I wanted to accomplish and more towards bigger platforms, helping young girls, helping Nick would always say, help children, you're helping children. When it became less about myself as a coach and wanting to sit at Wimbledon and wanting to be in the box and on the biggest stage, and more about just impacting human lives and wanting to grow more women in coaching in tennis and wanting to help young girls impact their lives so that later on they become very strong women. I think when you have a bigger platform and bigger vision, then you don't really sweat the small stuff in the sense that you manage through it and you take that moment and you don't disregard it, but you work through it and not internalize it as much. And then the other side of it is I have faced challenging parents as a young coach, and looking back, sometimes it's just not worth that stress for us as coaches. We need to enjoy and love what we do. I don't feel like I come to work. I genuinely love what I do. This is not work for me. I mean, I'm out on a tennis court teaching tennis, impacting lives, and I love what I do. And so just keeping that bit perspective on things and making sure that this is something that I enjoy doing and that passion and not let anything really get in my way. And there's obstacles in every career path. There's always challenges. I actually look at difficult parents and difficult female players as a challenge because I want to figure it out. I want to figure out how I can better understand the parents and how do I really break through on this girl that so many coaches have difficulty with? How do we connect with her? And I see it as a challenge. And that is one thing that is one area that I actually enjoy at this point in my career.
Yeah, that's a great perspective and a great way to view it. And I also think compassion is a big aspect of it because you got to kind of put yourself in their shoes and how much they care about their child and also how they don't know what they don't know and just kind of have compassion for that and help the parents see the things as you see them in a respectful way and in a compassionate way. I think that that comes into play a lot of times,
You
right?
have to be a listener as a coach. And then when you're working with parents, a lot of times the coaches do all the talking and you have to listen first and let them voice what they want to voice over. And also timing. Sometimes give a little space in when they contact you or when they communicate with you. If it's immediately after their son or daughter's loss on the court or a bad tournament or a bad moment, give it a little breathing room before you actually meet with the parents. There's little pieces of advice that can really make a big difference of when you communicate with them. So
Absolutely. And then as a coach, how have you worked on yourself to be a better coach? Like say your voice, how you deal with players. How have you changed as a coach throughout your 20 years at IMG?
very early on, being very open-minded and wanting to learn from others and taking the best qualities that I see in other coaches around me over the years and just pick up on their skills and their skill set and be very, I don't know if the word is easily mentored. I love learning. I've never stop learning from others. And I think as a coach, that has really been a huge impact. I'll go back to my coaching style has changed over the years, and it evolves as generations evolve. I would say that the generations now, in communicating with them, a lot of people ask me on the girls program, well, they'll say, well, what's the punishment if they don't go to fitness, or what's the consequence? And nowadays, I don't see punishments and consequences really effective as a coach. I see not giving them opportunities based on certain behaviors that are more effective. If, for example, if they don't go to fitness, they won't have the opportunity to play with the higher level girls. So I would say taking away opportunities may be a little bit more effective with today's generation, talking with them, communicating with them like they're adults, and bringing them in and seeing how they're doing. It's just evolving with how the generations evolve. And I've seen even within our academy, our coaches here that have been here for 30 years have changed as well. I mean, there was early days here at the academy, even when I started, there was a lot of yelling at players. Nick would yell, and the coaches here would yell at the students, and that's a push up or run to the lake. And I don't think that really connects in with where we're at right now. So it's really finding a way to connect with each individual and talking to them like they're an individual. We run a lot of coaches watching this podcast will have a team or a group setting, but seeing those players within your group or within your team as individuals and seeing them that way in your practices is really, really important.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because I definitely experienced the same thing. When I grew up playing, it was definitely that type of environment, coaches yelling at you. If you did something wrong, you were running for what seemed like the rest of your life, or push-ups or whatever. And that doesn't work anymore. And when I first got into coaching, I was trying to emulate what I saw as a player. So I was kind of doing the same things that I went through. And
Yes.
that failed miserably, right? That's when I started seeing like, okay, this is not working. And I've had to change that as a coach myself. So
Mhm.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it is so true. It's a different generation. There's more awareness. There's a bigger lens on everything too. They get to see, they're exposed to more things than we
Mhm.
were as kids. So yeah, it's just a completely different generation. And I think that you're spot on that. And I like what you said of taking away things that they might be proud of or that they are looking forward to doing. I think, or
Mhm.
maybe even positive reinforcement, right? Like if you worked really hard, then you'll get this, right? I think that works better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that that has probably been the biggest change is the communication style. And also when you go out there, having a presence out there is really important. The energy that we give off as coaches so that the players do feel an impact to perform for you as coaches. When giving your body language, you see some coaches out there on the court where they're leaning on the fence or they're on their cell phone, or they might not be disengaged, but they look disengaged. And there's a level of professionalism and energy and organization and passion that these kids really respond well to. And I think setting a high standard and a high bar of excellence as coaches nowadays is really important for our tennis industry.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys have any like cell phone policies? Do you have a no cell phone policy on court for coaches or players?
We don't have a policy in the sense of, I mean, it's definitely not. It's an environment that we've created as coaches here that we don't want our coaches on their cell phone. There are times where we have a lot of apps. It's a twofold situation because we've evolved with technology. So we have apps like PlaySite, or we have an app called Coach Now, where the player or the coaches are actually filming their players during practice and putting it on a little space for the player to access and also the parents so that they can see the progress that they're making over time. So it's a twofold. So they are on their cell phone, but I love the story. We have a military leadership colonel that comes in, Major Tannehill, to the academy, Colonel Tannehill, and he does leadership classes with our, or not classes, but sessions with our girls. And he puts them through the ringer as far as challenges them a lot. And one of the challenges that I loved was he had all of the girls line up on our baseball field here at the academy, and he had them in perfect positioning with their hands at their side. He had sprinklers going. He had all the conditions like horrible for these girls, but he had their focus, shoulders up, posture up. And he had them like that for about 20 minutes or so. And then he came to me, and Colonel Tannehill came to me and said, Margie, I'm going to go on my cell phone and watch what happens to these girls' body language. And as soon as he went on his cell phone, the girls started slouching, losing their positioning that they had been in, and they can feel that disengagement. I'm not necessarily saying cell phones are the downfall of our coaching, but there's a level of engagement and energy that needs to be given off with coaches to receive the best environment for their practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I saw also in your presentation that you brought, that what really caught my eye was that you brought other female coaches to your presentation. And I wanted to ask you, I'm guessing at this point things have changed, right? IMG, obviously, you're the head of female tennis, and I'm sure you have plenty of female coaches. But what would you say to a young coach, particularly a female coach that wants to have a career in coaching tennis?
I think about that a lot. Why don't we have more female tennis coaches? I would say one thing that helped for me was to have a vision, and I would like to see more female coaches to have visions for themselves within the industry and find little niches, because I think everyone can have a little niche in the industry, and then you find your passion. So thinking a little bit bigger in for themselves. And then, but at the same time, when you do have a vision or a long-term goal as a female coach, to understand that it's not a straight pathway to your vision or your goal. It takes time, and a lot of times you'll do jobs or skills that you think, why am I doing this? This is not what I want to do. This is not my goal, but that skill set has been brought into your career for a reason, because you can take away something from everything that you do. And, you know, in every industry, I do believe that in the tennis world, that there are so many opportunities for female coaches, and to not be afraid and to have the courage to go after your goals and have the patience.
And speaking of the industry, are there any things that you would like to see change in the tennis industry, in the coaching industry?
Think there's definitely an awareness. I would say women's tennis is one of the greatest sports as far as, I mean, we get a lot of coverage on TV. I would say probably at the professional level, the women's schedule seems pretty long with the travel. Even myself, back in the days when I was traveling 30 weeks of the year, it's a long road. And maybe to see a little bit of an adjustment to professional women's tennis for a lifestyle that's a little bit less lengthy of a schedule during the year, so that there's more women willing to travel, because really it starts at the TV is very powerful. What you see on TV, as far as I know personally, when growing up, I would watch the greats on TV like Steffi Graf and Lindsay Davenport and Mary Pierce in my generation watching TV, and that inspired me. And I think when you see more women coaches coaching women on TV as a young girl, you're going to be inspired. So getting more visibility of women coaches on the TV is where it can really start at the top to inspire young girls. And a lot of times coaching is, if you didn't, it's almost like a backup plan. I'm going to coach. I might coach, not making it a backup plan, making it something. And that's what I talk to a lot of our girls that are headed to college, and they're playing college tennis next year. And I say, listen, I would love to have you coach here one day. I think it's planting the seeds early on in young girls and making them realize that that is one of the best careers that you can have. It's not a backup career. So yeah, I can attest to that. So
I love that message, because I wish I had somebody tell me that when I was a junior player. I never considered coaching a career for myself. I studied biology and I went into that, did that for 4 years, and then kind of went into, I was doing research and then started coaching college on the side, and then kind of realized this is a lot more fun. Like
Yeah,
I
you
didn't do this work.
defaulted into it. You defaulted into it. It was a little different from myself where I had the early vision. I didn't want to leave the tennis industry. So I knew I was going into coaching. But yeah, creating more of that excitement with younger girls, especially the girls going in or playing college tennis currently.
And I know you've mentioned Nick. What has been one of the biggest lessons that you learned from the legendary Nick Bollettieri?
Yeah, I mean, Nick, there is not a day that goes by that he hasn't, I can't hear his voice. I mean, he would call me 6 or 7 times a day, and I was on the court with him for 6 or 7 hours a day. Towards the end of his life, driving him around on a golf cart every day until he was 90 years old. He was part of this program. He would walk into my office every day. I mean, for the last 10 years, let's say, and from 80 to 90 years old and say, "What do we got? What do we got, Marjorie?" He would call me Marjorie sometimes. And he always was just a passion, a level of energy. You never felt him tired, even though he would stay up all night writing articles. His mind was always going. He would start his day, walk into the academy with his briefcase at 5 a.m. and then hop on the yoga ball and work out, and then we'd be on the court. I mean, just this level of energy. So I always find when I find myself feeling if I'm tired or anything, I say, I'm not tired. Nick was never tired. That's just you never heard that from him, and you never felt his energy level drop based on who he worked with. He had the energy and passion for players that were one in the world, but then the same exact voice, the same intensity, the same enthusiasm as if somebody just came and picked up the racket and it was their first day working with a beginner tennis player or an adult. Or he just never changed his passion based on the level. And for me, he demanded the highest level of excellence for me personally. I had to be prepared. I had to be early. The court had to look professional. You always had to look busy. Even if you had nothing to do, you better find something to do. Just a demanding level of excellence is what I learned from Nick. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And what about today? Are there any coaches that you look up to today?
I don't have one coach. I mean, it will never change. For me, Nick will be the number one mentor for me in this industry. But I would say to this day, I look at coaches, every coach, and I don't look and say, oh, this coach doesn't have this or this coach doesn't have that. Every coach has their strength. And so I try and look at every coach and I see what their strength is, and I try and set them up for success. So all of the coaches that are under me in the program, we have about 45 coaches here. I try and look at them and see what their strengths are. And there's a lot of skill sets that certain coaches bring, and just putting them in the right position. But as far as looking up, I work with a great team here. I work with Jimmy Arias every day, who's in our leadership tennis director role. And one thing about Jimmy was the first student here at the academy, and he reached 5 in the world. But what I love about him is, number one, I come to work every day and I laugh. And I think having a fun environment where you enjoy working and not always being so serious, but you get a chance to really have fun and laugh. I hear a story from Jimmy every single day where I laugh, and I think I don't take that for granted. But what I look up to him is he's very honest and truthful. He always tells it straight, and I definitely respect that. And he does it with a finesse and a humor to him. And so he's very honest, and I feel also that he has a great eye for the game. He has a really good eye as far as when we walk around the court, sometimes you connect better with other coaches than some. And when I walk with Jimmy, I see what he sees when he's really helped me, push me outside my comfort zone, in the sense that, going back to the conversation we had earlier about girls not wanting to compete, he has pushed me to really bring that competitive feel to our girls program. And I really truly believe it's been one of the biggest assets is pushing our girls to compete in practice.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And obviously, Nick had such a huge impact in your life, more than just as a coach, but it sounds like even as a person. So that's wonderful to hear. And then I always ask this at the end. I want to ask you what has been the Grand Slam moment and the double bagel moment of your career. So the highest, and maybe share a low moment in your career that maybe taught you a lesson.
Wow. I mean, so many highs. I mean, I am so grateful. I mean, one of the coolest things about my highs here are just sometimes I look back and I have friendships and relationships with players that I admired when I was a junior player. The fact that I was able to meet with Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf and a lot of the greats and just being around them, I would say that's a really, really aspect I don't take for granted, being on the biggest stage. But the actual really biggest high for me, I would say, would be receiving that PTR Member of the Year award, because over the past 15 or 20 years, there was not one female that got that award, female coach. And so that was on a global stage. So I was very honored to get that award. It just put in perspective, it wasn't an award for the state of Florida or the country of the US. It was an international award. And for me, it was a surprise and I didn't expect it. And it really meant a lot to me during that time. So I would say the PTR Member of the Year award.
Awesome. And what about a double bagel moment? Whatever you want to share.
Double bagel moments. I would say again, if I were to divide my career up into two chapters, the first chapter, I had some really exciting moments. I think I stressed out way too much about things, or like we were talking about, internalized things. But the second part of my journey here as a coach, I'm really enjoying it thoroughly because there's nothing that really bothers me. I really come to work and I have challenges every day. So I think my mindset shift early on in my career was, I wouldn't say a low, but it just, I look back and think, I wish I was the way I am now, earlier on in my career. So that's
Yeah.
advice for all the young coaches that are out there that are stressing over things they shouldn't stress over.
And stressing over getting old. We only get better with age. Definitely become a better coach with age for sure.
And now I am a mom to, I have a 1-year-old son, and that was something that I was so career driven, and deep down inside of me, I always wanted to become a mom. And so that has been the greatest thing in my life. So I'm very, very grateful for that. So I would also say that that was my high moment.
Ah, that's so sweet. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today. Loved having you, and all the best at IMG.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.